When Noelle arrives at the Ashcroft estate for a simple housekeeping interview, she's mistaken for the billionaire's arranged bride. But as secrets unravel and sparks fly, one question remains. What if fate got it right? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun beamed down on Noelle Carter as she made her way up the long, winding driveway of the Ashcroft estate. At 34, she had faced enough hardships to last a lifetime, but today, a glimmer of hope pushed her forward, despite her aching feet. Her sensible black heels, worn at the edges and giving her blisters, clicked against the pavement as she clutched her resume tightly. "Just breathe," she whispered to herself. "It's just a housekeeping job. You've done this before." But this wasn't just any home. The Ashcroft estate stood like a castle on the hill, its stone facade and towering windows, a reminder of the wealth that Noelle had only ever seen in magazines. The kind of place where people like her came to work, not to live. As she approached the massive front doors, her stomach twisted with nerves. The housekeeping position offered modest pay and long hours, but it was steady work, something she desperately needed. With rent overdue and her younger sister Lily depending on her, Noelle couldn't afford to blow this interview. Taking one last deep breath, she raised her hand and knocked firmly on the door. To her surprise, it swung open immediately, as if someone had been waiting just on the other side. A tall man with deep blue eyes and dark hair, touched with grey at the temples, stood before her. He wore an expensive-looking suit that fit him perfectly, but it was his expression that caught her off guard. Intense, searching, with a flicker of something that looked almost like relief. "You're early," he said softly, his voice deep and slightly raspy, as if he didn't use it often. Noelle blinked in confusion. Was she early for the interview? She had checked the time repeatedly on the bus ride over. "I'm sorry," she began. "I thought the appointment was for—" "It doesn't matter," he interrupted, stepping aside to let her in. "Please, come inside." As Noelle stepped into the grand foyer, she was struck by the contrast between the imposing exterior and the strangely empty feeling inside. The mansion was immaculately decorated with antique furniture and artwork that probably cost more than she would earn in a lifetime. But it felt hollow, as if no one really lived there. The man closed the door behind her and turned, studying her with an intensity that made her skin tingle. "I'm Noelle Carter," she said, extending her hand, determined to make a good impression on who she assumed was the butler or house manager. "I'm here about the housekeeping position." A flicker of confusion crossed his face, but then it was gone, replaced by something unreadable. Instead of taking her extended hand, he simply nodded and led her further into the house. "I'm Graham Ashcroft," he said without turning. Noelle nearly stumbled. Graham Ashcroft? Not the house manager, the owner, himself. The billionaire hotel mogul who had vanished from public life 3 years ago after his wife's death. The man whose face had been splashed across newspapers and gossip magazines, always with headlines speculating about scandals and secrets. "Mr. Ashcroft, she started, but he cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Let's sit down," he said, leading her into a sunlit sitting room with large windows overlooking manicured gardens. "Would you like some tea?" Before she could answer, a housekeeper appeared as if from nowhere, nodded at Graham's silent signal and disappeared again. "I don't care why you're here," Graham said suddenly, his eyes meeting hers. They were haunted but somehow alive with an emotion Noelle couldn't quite place. "Just don't leave yet, please." There was something in his voice, a crack, a hint of desperation. That caught her off guard. This wasn't how job interviews were supposed to go. Something was very wrong, but before she could speak, the housekeeper returned with a silver tea service and set it on the table between them. "Thank you, Mrs. Hudson," Graham said, dismissing the woman with another nod. Once they were alone, Noelle cleared her throat. "Mr. Ashcroft, I think there might be a misunderstanding. I'm here about the housekeeping position that was advertised in the position," he repeated, as if testing the words. A strange smile touched his lips. "Yes, of course." He poured tea into delicate china cups, his movements precise and controlled. "Sugar? Milk?" "Just milk, please," Noelle replied, increasingly confused by the situation. As Graham handed her the cup, their fingers brushed briefly, and she noticed how his hand trembled slightly. For a man rumored to be cold and calculating, he seemed surprisingly fragile up close. "You're not what I expected," he said quietly, sitting back with his own tea untouched. But perhaps that's a good thing. Noelle took a sip of her tea to hide her confusion. She needed this job badly enough to overlook the strangeness of the interview so far. "I have 5 years of experience in household management and cleaning services. I'm very detail-oriented and that won't be necessary," Graham interrupted again. "Tell me about yourself instead, not your qualifications. You, where you're from, why you're here." His directness threw her off balance. "I'm from Cedar Springs originally, small town about 2 hours north. I moved to the city 8 years ago for better opportunities, and I'm here because I'm behind on rent. Because my sister needs textbooks for college. Because everything is falling apart. Because I need a job and I'm good at keeping things in order." Graham studied her for a long moment, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Order is important to you." "Yes," she admitted. "When so much is out of control, it helps to have clean counters and folded laundry." To her surprise, he laughed, a brief, rusty sound as if he hadn't used it in a long time. "Honest, I appreciate that." Noelle shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't going at all how she'd planned. She should be answering questions about her cleaning experience, not having an oddly intimate conversation with one of the richest men in the country. "Mr. Ashcroft, I'm a bit confused about what position I'm actually interviewing for." Something flickered in his eyes, and he set his cup down with a soft clink. "You don't know who I think you are, do you?" Before she could answer, the doors to the sitting room swung open, and an older woman with sharp features and perfectly coiffed silver hair strode in. She wore an expensive-looking suit and carried herself with unmistakable authority. "Graham," Henderson said, "you had a visitor, and I simply couldn't—" The woman stopped abruptly, her eyes narrowing as she took in Noelle. "Who is this?" Graham stood, tension evident in every line of his body. "Mother, I wasn't expecting you today." "Clearly," the woman replied, her gaze remaining fixed on Noelle. "Well, aren't you going to introduce us?" Graham's jaw tightened. "This is Noelle Carter. Noelle, this is my mother, Victoria Ashcroft." Victoria's eyebrows rose. "Carter, not Harrison." Noelle stood, smoothing her simple skirt nervously. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Ashcroft." Victoria ignored the greeting. "Graham, a word, now." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked out of the room. Graham hesitated, looking at Noelle with an expression that seemed almost apologetic. "Excuse me for a moment," he said, then followed his mother. Alone in the grand sitting room, Noelle could hear the sharp whispers from the hallway, though she couldn't make out the words. Something was very wrong, and it was becoming clear that she had walked into a situation far more complicated than a job interview. She considered leaving, slipping out quietly before things got even stranger, but the memory of Graham's plea echoed in her mind. "Just don't leave yet, please." Before she could decide, the door opened again, and Graham returned alone. His face was drawn, but he had a determined set to his jaw. "I apologize for the interruption," he said, sitting down, across from her again. "My mother is a protective." "Mr. Ashcroft, I think I should go," Noelle said, gathering her purse and resume. "There's obviously been some misunderstanding, and—" "Stay for dinner," he said suddenly. The words weren't a command, but almost a request. "Just one dinner." "Please?" Noelle stared at him, bewildered. "Dinner? But I came for a job interview." "And you'll have one," he assured her. "After dinner. A proper interview, I promise. Consider it an apology for today's confusion." Every instinct told Noelle to leave, to thank him politely but firmly and walk out the door. Yet something in his eyes, a loneliness that mirrored her own, made her hesitate. "Just dinner?" she asked skeptically. Graham nodded. "Just dinner. And then, if you still want to leave, Mrs. Hudson will drive you home." Against her better judgment, Noelle found herself agreeing. "All right, one dinner." His relief was palpable, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "Thank you. In the meantime, would you like to see the grounds?" The gardens are particularly nice this time of year. The afternoon passed in a surreal blur. Graham showed her around the estate, the rose gardens, the greenhouse filled with exotic plants, the small lake where elegant swans glided across the surface. He spoke little, but when he did, it was with surprising thoughtfulness. He pointed out a family of rabbits near the edge of the woods, the way the light hit the water at certain times of day, the names of flowers she'd never seen before. Noelle found herself relaxing despite the strangeness of the situation. There was something almost childlike in the way Graham showed her his favorite spots, as if he rarely had anyone to share them with. As the sun began to set, they returned to the house for dinner. In the formal dining room, a table that could have seated 20 was set for just the two of them, with fine china and crystal glasses that caught the light from the chandelier overhead. "This is excessive for a job interview dinner," Noelle commented as a server pulled out her chair. Graham gave that same small, rusty laugh. "The staff doesn't get many chances to use the good china. I think they're enjoying having a guest." The meal was the finest Noelle had ever eaten. Delicate soups and perfectly cooked fish, vegetables prepared in ways she couldn't even name. Graham ate little instead, watching her with an interest that made her both uncomfortable and oddly flattered. "So, Mr. Ashcroft," she said, setting down her fork, "who did you think I was when I arrived today?" Graham's face stilled, and for a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. "I'm supposed to be meeting someone, a woman named Eleanor Harrison." "And who is she?" Noelle asked, though from Victoria Ashcroft's reaction earlier, she had begun to suspect. Graham's fingers tapped a restless pattern on the tablecloth. "My future wife. Or so my family has arranged." Noelle nearly choked on her wine. "Your what?" "It's an arrangement," he explained, not meeting her eyes. "Part of a family agreement to protect the Ashcroft name and inheritance. I don't expect you to understand." "You're right, I don't," Noelle said, setting down her glass. "People don't arrange marriages anymore. Not in this century, anyway." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "The very wealthy still live by different rules, Miss Carter. Old agreements, old promises, the appearance of propriety above all else. And you're just going along with it?" Graham's expression darkened. "After what happened with my wife, it seemed easier to agree than to fight." Noelle remembered the headlines from 3 years ago, the speculation, the rumors of scandal surrounding Eliza Ashcroft's death. She had fallen from the balcony of their penthouse apartment, and while it had been ruled an accident, the gossip magazines had hinted at darker possibilities. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "About your wife." "Don't be," he replied, his voice suddenly hard. "Our marriage was never what people thought it was." An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Noelle pushed her dessert around the plate, no longer hungry. "I should go," she said finally. "Thank you for dinner, but I don't think—" "Stay," Graham interrupted, then seemed to catch himself. "I mean, stay the night. It's late and the roads can be dangerous after dark. We have plenty of guest rooms." Noelle stared at him. "Mr. Ashcroft, I came here for a job interview, not whatever this is." "Just Noelle," he said softly. "Just for tonight. In the morning you can leave with no questions asked. Or," he added, his eyes meeting hers, "you can stay and we can discuss a real position here, your choice. She should say no, she should insist on leaving immediately." Yet as she looked at Graham Ashcroft, powerful, wealthy, and somehow utterly alone, she found herself nodding. "One night," she agreed. "But in the morning, we talk honestly about why I'm really here." Graham's smile was small but genuine. "I promise." As Mrs. Hudson showed her to a guest room more luxurious than any hotel Noelle had ever seen, she couldn't help wondering what she had gotten herself into. This was supposed to be a simple job interview, a chance at steady employment. Instead, she had somehow become entangled in the life of a man who looked at her like she was both a miracle and a mystery he wasn't prepared for. "One night," she told herself as she slipped between silken sheets. Just one night, and then reality would return in the morning. But as she drifted off to sleep in a strange bed in a mansion on a hill, Noelle couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening here had only just begun. Morning sunlight streamed through the heavy curtains as Noelle opened her eyes. For a moment, she felt disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, the canopied bed, the antique furniture, the plush carpet beneath her feet as she slid out from under the silken sheets. Then the memories of yesterday came flooding back. The strange interview, Graham Ashcroft's intense gaze, the dinner that wasn't meant for her. What am I doing here? She whispered to herself, crossing to the window and pulling back the curtains. The view was breathtaking, sprawling gardens, a sparkling lake in the distance, and beyond that, rolling hills dotted with trees, just beginning to turn gold with autumn. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, wrapping her arms around herself, suddenly aware that she was still wearing the borrowed nightgown Mrs. Hudson had provided the night before. The door opened to reveal a young woman in a neat uniform carrying a tray. "Good morning, miss. I've brought your breakfast," she said, setting the tray on a small table by the window. "Mr. Ashcroft asked me to tell you that fresh clothes have been laid out in the dressing room, and he'll meet you in the library whenever." "You're ready." "Thank you," Noelle replied, eyeing the steaming coffee and freshly baked pastries with surprise. "But I can't accept clothes from Mr. Ashcroft. I'll just wear what I came in yesterday." The maid hesitated. "I'm afraid your clothes were taken to be laundered, miss. Mrs. Hudson's orders." Noelle frowned. "So I have no choice but to wear whatever's been laid out for me." "The items were selected from the guest wardrobe, miss. Nothing personal." The young woman seemed uncomfortable. "Will there be anything else?" "No, thank you," Noelle sighed. After the maid left, Noelle ate her breakfast, thinking through her options. She needed to clear up this misunderstanding once and for all, get her clothes back, and leave. The housekeeping job was clearly a lost cause now. She couldn't work for a man who had mistaken her for his arranged bride, no matter how much she needed the money. In the adjoining dressing room, she found not the plain uniform she had expected, but a simple yet elegant blue dress, along with new underwear and even shoes in her size. The whole ensemble probably cost more than her monthly rent. She hesitated, then put on the clothes. They fit perfectly, which was both convenient and slightly unnerving. How had they known her size? After dressing, she followed the maid's directions. To the library. A grand room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and comfortable leather chairs arranged around a fireplace. Graham stood by the window, staring out at the grounds, hands clasped behind his back. He turned when she entered, and something in his expression made her heart skip, a mixture of appreciation and surprise, as if he hadn't expected her to actually be there. "Good morning," he said. "I trust you slept well?" "I did," Noelle admitted. "But Mr. Ashcroft—" "Graham," he corrected gently. "Please." "Graham," she relented. "We need to talk about why I'm really here. I came for a job interview, not whatever. This is—" He gestured for her to sit, then took the chair opposite her. "You're right, I owe you an explanation." He ran a hand through his dark hair, mussing it slightly. "When you arrived yesterday, I mistook you for someone else. Someone my family has arranged for me to meet." "Eleanor Harrison," Noelle supplied. "Your arranged bride." Graham winced at the term. "It sounds medieval when you put it that way." "Because it is," Noelle said firmly. "Perhaps," he conceded, "but it's a reality of my life. The Ashcroft fortune comes with strings attached, old agreements, family alliances. My grandfather's will specified that to maintain control of the company, the male heirs must be married by 45. And you're 41, he finished. "My birthday is in 4 months. After my wife died, His voice faltered. "I withdrew from everything, but time hasn't stopped. And now my mother and the board of directors are insisting I fulfill the terms of the will." "So they arranged a marriage for you? In the 21st century?" Graham's laugh was hollow. "The very rich live by different rules, Noelle. The Harrisons are old money like us. Eleanor Harrison comes from the right background, has the right connections. It's a business arrangement, nothing more. And you're just going along with it?" Noelle couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. His eyes met hers, and in them she saw a weariness that spoke of battles fought and lost. "After Eliza died, I lost the will to fight them. It seemed easier to just comply." Noelle leaned forward. "What happened with your wife? I mean, I read the headlines, but..." Graham's face closed off immediately. An accident. That's all you need to know. An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Noelle shifted in her seat. I should go, she said finally. I appreciate your hospitality, but this was all a misunderstanding. Wait, Graham said, standing as she did. I still need a housekeeper. Noelle raised an eyebrow. Really? After all this? The position is real, he insisted. Mrs. Hudson is retiring at the end of the month. We were interviewing candidates. Your resume was actually quite impressive. So you did look at it? After you went to bed last night, he admitted. 5 years of experience. Excellent references. You're qualified. Noelle, she hesitated. I don't know, this situation is already complicated enough. The job pays well. Room and board included, plus health insurance and 4 weeks of paid vacation annually. His eyes held hers. And I suspect, from the address on your resume, that you could use the stability. Noelle felt a flush of embarrassment. Her address was in a part of town known for its low rents and high crime rates. You don't know anything about my circumstances? No, he agreed softly. But I'd like to. Before she could respond, the library door opened, and Victoria Ashcroft swept in. Her immaculately dressed in a designer suit despite the early hour. Graham, I need to speak with you about... She stopped short when she saw Noelle. You're still here. Noelle straightened her spine. I was just leaving, Mrs. Ashcroft. Mother, Graham said, his voice taking on an edge Noelle hadn't heard before. I've offered Ms. Carter the position of head housekeeper. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Have you now? And does Ms. Carter understand that Eleanor Harrison will be arriving next week? I can't imagine she'd want to work here under those circumstances. Eleanor is coming here? Graham asked, his face paling slightly. Of course she is, Victoria replied smoothly. The agreement has been in place for months. Just because you've been dragging your feet doesn't mean the Harrisons have. She'll be staying for a month to get acquainted. The tension in the room was palpable. Noelle looked between mother and son, feeling like an intruder in their family drama. Excuse me, she said quietly. I should really go now. No, Graham said sharply, then softened his tone. Please consider the position. As my mother said, there will be a guest staying here soon. We'll need the extra help. Victoria made a small sound of disapproval, but said nothing. Noelle hesitated. The job would solve so many of her problems. The pay was better than anything else she was likely to find, and the included housing would mean she and Lily could get out of their cramped apartment in the bad part of town. But at what cost? I need to think about it, she said finally. Of course, Graham agreed quickly. Take the day. Mrs. Hudson can drive you home and you can let me know your decision tomorrow. Victoria cleared her throat. Graham, we have matters to discuss, privately. Graham ignored her, his eyes still on Noelle. Is that acceptable? Noelle nodded. I'll let you know tomorrow. As she left the library, she could hear Victoria's voice rising in anger, though the heavy door muffled the words. Whatever was happening between mother and son, she was better off staying out of it. Mrs. Hudson arranged for the chauffeur to drive Noelle home, her own clothes returned, pressed and folded in a shopping bag. The transition from the luxury of the Ashcroft estate to her rundown apartment building was jarring. The elevator was broken again, so she climbed the 4 flights of stairs, her mind still spinning from the events of the past 24 hours. When she opened the apartment door, Lily was sitting at their small kitchen table, textbooks spread around her. At 20, her younger sister was everything Noelle had hoped she would be, smart, determined, and on her way to a better life. Lily looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. Where have you been? I was worried sick. You didn't come home last night and you weren't answering your phone. Noelle grimaced, remembering that her phone had died the day before. I'm sorry, Lily. It's a long story. The job interview went strangely. Strangely how? Lily asked, eyeing the shopping bag in Noelle's hand. And what's that? Noelle set the bag down, collapsing into a chair. You're not going to believe this. She told Lily everything. The mistaken identity, the dinner, the job offer. Her sister's expression shifted from concern to disbelief to excitement. Wait, Lily interrupted. Graham Ashcroft. The Graham Ashcroft. The billionaire. Who disappeared from public life after his wife died. The very same, Noel confirmed. And he offered you a job with housing included? Yes, but Lily, it's complicated. His mother clearly doesn't want me there, and this Eleanor woman is coming. Next week, and the whole setup is just strange. Lily leaned forward, her eyes serious. Noel, we got another eviction notice yesterday, third one. They're not going to give us another extension. Noel felt her heart sink. I thought you said you worked out a payment plan with the landlord. I tried, Lily sighed. But he says if we don't pay in full by the end of the month, we're out. And my financial aid check got delayed again. The reality of their situation settled heavily on Noel's shoulders. They were running out of options fast. Maybe I should take the job, she said slowly. At least until we can find something else. It's more than just a job, Nell, Lily said, using her childhood nickname. It's a roof over our heads, one that doesn't leak when it rains. But what about your classes? The campus is an hour from the Ashcroft estate. Lily waved a dismissive hand. I can take the bus. I do it anyway. And most of my classes this semester are online. Noel chewed her lip, considering. The practical benefits were undeniable, but something about the whole situation still felt off. The way Graham looked at her, the mystery surrounding his wife's death, Victoria's obvious disdain. I'll think about it, she promised. I have until tomorrow to decide. That night, as Lily slept, Noel sat by their apartment window looking out at the city lights. Her mind kept returning to Graham, the sadness in his eyes, the way his face lit up when he showed her the gardens, the gentleness in his voice when he asked her to stay. There was a story there, one that the gossip magazines had never uncovered. Part of her wanted to know what it was. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The position is yours if you want it. Room for your sister as well. Graham. Noel stared at the screen. How had he known about Lily? And how had he gotten her number? As if reading her mind, another text followed. Mrs. Hudson took the liberty of noting your contact information from your resume. I hope you don't mind. She should mind. It was presumptuous, intrusive even. Yet instead of anger, she felt a strange flutter in her chest. Someone was thinking about her, planning for her, considering her needs before she voiced them. When was the last time anyone had done that? With trembling fingers, she typed her reply. We'll take it. When can we move in? The response came almost immediately. Tomorrow, I'll send a car. Noel stared at the phone, hardly believing what she had just agreed to. She was moving into the Ashcroft estate, not as the bride Graham had mistaken her for, but as his employee. Yet as she finally went to bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something much more complicated than a simple job. The look in Graham's eyes when he asked her to stay hadn't been that of an employer to a potential employee. It had been something else entirely, something that made her both nervous and strangely hopeful. The next morning, Noel and Lily packed their meager belongings into suitcases and boxes. The landlord was all too happy to let them break their lease, especially when Noel paid the overdue rent in full with an advance Graham had sent over with the car. As they drove through the imposing gates of the Ashcroft estate, Lily's eyes widened. You didn't say it was a castle? Noel laughed, some of her tension easing at her sister's excitement. It's not a castle, it's just a very large house. Same difference, Lily insisted, pressing her face against the window as the mansion came into view. Oh my God, Nell, there's a lake. When they pulled up to the front entrance, Mrs. Hudson was waiting for them, her stern face softening slightly at the sight of the sisters. Welcome to Ashcroft Estate, she said formally. Mr. Ashcroft has asked that you be given the East Wing guest suites. They're connected by a sitting room, so you'll each have privacy but still be close. Noel stepped out of the car, Lily following close behind. That's very kind, but isn't the servants' quarters more appropriate? Mrs. Hudson's expression was unreadable. Mr. Ashcroft was quite specific about the arrangements. Now, if you'll follow me, I'll show you to your rooms and explain your duties. As they followed the older woman into the mansion, Noel couldn't help noticing that Graham was nowhere to be seen. After all his insistence that she take the job, his absence was surprising. "Is Mr. Ashcroft not here?" she asked as casually as she could. "He had business in the city," Mrs. Hudson replied. "He asked me to tell you he looks forward to dining with you this evening. Both of you," she added with a nod to Lily. Lily shot Noelle a questioning look, which Noelle ignored. She would explain the strangeness of the situation later, when they were alone. Their rooms were more luxurious than any hotel they had ever stayed in, spacious, with plush carpets, antique furniture, and bathrooms bigger than their entire apartment. Lily bounced on her bed like a child, laughing with delight. "We're going to live here for real?" "For now," Noelle cautioned. "Remember, this is a job, not a fairy tale." But as she unpacked her few belongings, placing them carefully in the mahogany dresser, she couldn't help feeling that this was beyond any job she had ever imagined, and that Graham Ashcroft was nothing like any employer she had ever had. That evening, as they prepared for dinner, Noelle found a dress laid out on her bed, a simple but elegant black sheath that once again was exactly her size. A note beside it read simply, "If you wish, G." She hesitated, then put it on. When she emerged from her room, Lily was waiting in the sitting area, wearing a new dress of her own. "Did you get one too?" Noelle asked. Lily nodded, twirling to show off the blue dress that perfectly matched her eyes. There was a note saying it was a welcome gift. "Nell, what's going on here? This is more than just a housekeeping position." Noelle sighed. "I know. I'm still trying to figure it out myself." A soft knock at the door announced a maid who had come to escort them to dinner. As they followed her through the winding corridors of the mansion, Noelle couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking deeper into a mystery she didn't understand. In the dining room, Graham stood as they entered. He was dressed formally in a dark suit, his hair still slightly damp as if he had just showered. His eyes found Noelle immediately, a smile lighting his face. "Welcome," he said, coming forward to greet them. "I'm so glad you decided to accept the position, Noelle." He turned to Lily, extending his hand. "And you must be Lily. It's a pleasure to meet you." Lily shook his hand, eyes wide. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Ashcroft." "Graham, please," he insisted, gesturing for them to sit. "We don't stand on ceremony. Here." As servants brought out course after course of delicious food, Graham asked Lily about her studies, showing genuine interest in her answers. Noelle watched the exchange with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. Why was this wealthy, powerful man being so kind to them? As if sensing her thoughts, Graham turned to her. "I hope your rooms are satisfactory." "They're far too grand for a housekeeper," Noelle replied honestly. "Nonsense," he said dismissively. "Besides, the staff quarters are being renovated. Consider it a practical arrangement." Lily kicked Noelle gently under the table, a clear signal to stop questioning there. "Good fortune." "The dresses are lovely," Noelle said instead. "Thank you." Graham's smile was warm. "I'm glad you like them. I thought, that is, Mrs. Hudson thought you might appreciate having something nice for dinner." The meal continued pleasantly, but Noelle couldn't shake her unease. There was something Graham wasn't telling her, some reason beyond a simple job offer that had made him so eager to have her stay. As dessert was being served, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. "Is everything all right?" Noelle asked. "Fine," he replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Just a reminder that we'll have a guest arriving this weekend." "Eleanor Harrison?" Noelle asked before she could stop herself. Graham's eyes met hers, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. "Yes, Eleanor will be staying with us for a month." Lily looked between them, clearly sensing the tension. "Who's Eleanor Harrison?" "A family friend," Graham said smoothly, "and potentially my future wife." The words hung in the air, changing the atmosphere instantly. Lily's eyes widened in understanding, and Noelle felt a strange twist in her chest that she refused to acknowledge as disappointment. "I see," Noelle said quietly. "Well, we'll make sure her stay is comfortable." Graham's expression was unreadable. "I'm sure you will." Later, as they walked back to their rooms, Lily grabbed Noelle's arm. "Okay, spill. What's really going on here?" Noelle sighed. "It's complicated, Lily. Graham is being forced into an arranged marriage by his family. Eleanor Harrison is the bride they chose. Arranged marriage, seriously? Lily shook her head in disbelief. And where do you fit into all this? I don't, Noelle insisted. I'm just the housekeeper. But as she said the words, she knew they weren't entirely true. The way Graham looked at her, the special treatment, the connecting rooms far from the servants' quarters, none of it fit the role of just the housekeeper. And despite all her misgivings, despite knowing that Eleanor Harrison was arriving in just a few days, Noelle couldn't deny the flutter in her chest whenever Graham entered a room. She was stepping into dangerous territory and she knew it. But as she drifted off to sleep in her luxurious new bedroom, she couldn't bring herself to regret her decision to stay. Not yet, anyway. The days leading up to Eleanor Harrison's arrival passed in a whirlwind of activity. Under Mrs. Hudson's watchful eye, Noelle learned the ins and outs of running the Ashcroft estate. Everything from staff schedules to Graham's preferences in food and drink. Though technically hired as head housekeeper, her role seemed to blur with each passing day. She found herself included in meetings about estate matters, consulted on menus, even asked about redecorating the rarely used guest wing where Eleanor would stay. Is this normal? She asked Mrs. Hudson on their third day, after Graham had sought her opinion on which paintings should be moved to Eleanor's suite. For Mr. Ashcroft to be so involved with the staff, Mrs. Hudson's lips thinned. Nothing has been normal since you arrived, Miss Carter. The older woman wasn't unkind, but her loyalty to the Ashcroft family, particularly to Victoria, was clear. She watched Noelle with a mixture of curiosity and caution, as if trying to determine whether she was a threat. Lily, meanwhile, had settled into life at the estate with remarkable ease. Her online classes kept her busy during the day, but in the evenings, she often joined Graham in the library. He had discovered her interest in art history and began showing her the Ashcroft collection, pieces that had been in the family for generations. He's nothing like what the tabloids say, Lily told Noelle one night as they sat in their shared sitting room. They make him out to be this cold, heartless recluse, but he's actually kind of sweet. He's our employer, Lily, Noelle reminded her, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. In truth, Graham didn't treat either of them like employees, more like guests or friends. The thought made her uncomfortable. She had noticed how his eyes followed her when she entered a room, how he found reasons to be wherever she was working. Twice now he had sought her out in the gardens during her afternoon break, bringing her tea and sitting with her in companionable silence. And each time, her heart had beaten just a little faster. "You're falling for him," Lily said suddenly, breaking into her thoughts. "Don't be ridiculous," Noelle protested, feeling heat rush to her cheeks. "He's engaged, or nearly engaged, to someone else. Someone he doesn't even know," Lily pointed out. "Someone his family chose for him. That doesn't matter," Noelle insisted. "We're not in his world, Lily. People like us don't end up with people like him." Lily's expression softened. "Maybe in real life, but this doesn't feel like real life, does it? Living in this mansion, wearing clothes that cost more than our old rent? It's temporary," Noelle said firmly. "Don't forget that. Eleanor Harrison arrives tomorrow, and everything will change." But as she lay in bed that night, Noelle couldn't stop thinking about Graham. The sadness in his eyes when he spoke of his late wife, the way his face lit up when he made her laugh, the gentle way he had tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear during their walk in the garden that afternoon. She was in dangerous territory and she knew it. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the September air crisp with the promise of fall. Noelle woke early, wanting to ensure everything was perfect for their guest's arrival. But as she passed the library on her way to the kitchen, she heard raised voices. "This charade has gone on long enough, Graham." Victoria's sharp tones carried through the door, which had been left slightly ajar. "I've indulged your games with this housekeeper and her sister, but Eleanor arrives today. It's time to focus on what's important. They're not games, Mother." Graham's voice was low but firm. "Noelle is valuable to this household, and Lily is a distraction," Victoria cut in, "just like her sister. The staff is talking, Graham. Do you have any idea how it looks? You spending time with a woman half your age instead of preparing to meet your future wife?" "Noelle is 34, hardly half my age," Graham countered, "and I don't care how it looks. For the first time since Eliza— "Don't," Victoria interrupted, her voice suddenly cold. "Don't you dare bring her into this. What happened with Eliza was your fault, and you know it." There was a long silence, and when Graham spoke again, his voice was tight with controlled anger. "Get out! Graham, get out!" Noelle backed away quickly as the library door opened. Victoria emerged, her face flushed with anger. She stopped, short when she saw Noelle, her eyes narrowing. "Eavesdropping, Miss Carter." "I was on my way to the kitchen," Noelle said evenly, though her heart was racing. "Is there something you need?" Victoria studied her for a long moment. "What I need," she said finally, "is for you to remember your place in this household. You are the housekeeper, nothing more." Without waiting for a response, she swept past, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. Noelle hesitated, torn between continuing to the kitchen and checking on Graham. Concern won out, and she tapped lightly on the library door. "Come in," Graham called, his voice still strained. He stood by the window, his back to the door, shoulders tense. When he turned and saw her, his expression softened. "Noelle, I thought it might be my mother coming back for round 2. I heard some of that," she admitted. "I wasn't trying to listen, but—" "It's fine," he interrupted, moving to pour himself a drink from the crystal decanter on the side table. "It was barely 9 a.m. My mother and I have never seen eye to eye on most things." Noelle stepped further into the room. "She mentioned Eliza, your wife." Graham's hand tightened on the glass. "Ex-wife, though the tabloids tend to forget that part." "You were divorced?" Noelle asked, surprised. The gossip magazines had always portrayed Eliza as the beloved wife whose tragic death had driven Graham into seclusion. "We had filed the papers," Graham said, his voice flat. "The divorce wasn't final when the accident happened." He turned to face her, and the pain in his eyes made Noelle's heart ache. "The official story is that she fell from our penthouse balcony after a party. The truth is," he took a deep breath, "the truth is she was drunk. We'd had a fight about her affair with my brother. She went out to the balcony to smoke, lost her balance and—" "Oh, Graham," Noelle murmured, moving closer without thinking. "I'm so sorry." "The worst part," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "is that I didn't love her anymore. I hadn't for years. Our marriage was arranged, just like this thing with Eleanor is supposed to be. My mother pushed for it because Eliza's family had connections that would benefit Ashcroft Enterprises." "And you went along with it?" "I was young," Graham said wearily. 25, fresh out of business school, eager to please my father. Eliza was beautiful, sophisticated. It seemed like it could work. And for a while, it did. But then my father died. I took over the company, and Eliza realized I would never be the husband she wanted. Someone who would take her to parties and galas every night, who would live for the social scene. So she turned to your brother," Noelle concluded softly. Graham nodded, draining his glass. "Alexander was always more than happy to be the life of the party. They carried on their affair for 2 years before I found out." "What happened to Alexander?" Noelle had never heard Graham mention a brother before. "He lives in Europe now. After the scandal, my mother thought it best he keep his distance. He calls occasionally, asking for money. I send it. It's easier than dealing with him." The raw honesty in his voice caught Noelle off guard. He was sharing things with her that had never made it to the gossip columns, vulnerabilities he kept hidden from the world. "Why are you telling me all this?" she asked quietly. Graham set down his glass and moved closer to her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. "Because when you look at me, Noelle, I don't see pity or judgment or calculation. I just see me. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world?" Before she could respond, the sound of a car on the gravel driveway broke the moment. Graham stepped back, his expression shuddering. "That will be Eleanor," he said, straightening his tie. "We should go greet her." In the grand foyer, the staff had assembled in 2 neat rows. Mrs. Hudson had instructed Noelle to stand with them, but Graham motioned for her to join him near the door. Lily, coming down the stairs, hurried to Noelle's side, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Is she here?" she whispered. "The almost fiancée?" Noelle nodded, feeling a strange knot in her stomach. Until now, Eleanor Harrison had been just a name, an abstract concept. But in moments, she would be a real person, the woman Graham was expected to marry. The front doors opened and Victoria swept in, followed by a statuesque blonde in her early 30s. Eleanor Harrison was everything Noelle was not. Tall, slender, dressed in what was clearly a designer outfit, her makeup flawless, her movements graceful and confident. "Graham, darling," Victoria said, her voice warm in a way Noelle had never heard before. "May I present Eleanor Harrison? Eleanor, my son, Graham Ashcroft." Graham stepped forward, taking Eleanor's extended hand and bringing it briefly to his lips. "Ms. Harrison, welcome to Ashcroft Estate. Please, call me Eleanor," she replied, her voice musical and refined. "After all, we'll be getting to know each other quite well over the next month." Her eyes, a cool grey, assessed Graham with obvious approval before sliding to Noelle and Lily. "And who might these be?" "This is Noelle Carter, our head housekeeper," Graham said, something in his tone making Noelle glance at him sharply. "And her sister, Lily." Eleanor's smile didn't reach her eyes. "How lovely. I do hope they've prepared the East Wing suite. I specifically requested it when speaking with your mother." Noelle felt a chill. The East Wing suite, where she and Lily were currently staying. "Actually," Noelle began, but Victoria cut her off. "Of course, dear, everything is arranged just as you asked." Graham frowned. "Mother, Noelle and Lily are currently temporary arrangements," Victoria interrupted smoothly. "Miss Carter and her sister will be moved to more suitable accommodations by this afternoon." Eleanor's smile widened. "Perfect. Now, I've had a terribly long journey. Perhaps someone could show me to my room so I can freshen up before dinner." "I'll show you," Victoria offered. "Graham, why don't you see to the luggage? I believe there are quite a few pieces." As Victoria led Eleanor toward the stairs, the blonde paused, looking back at Graham. "I do hope we'll have time to get properly acquainted at dinner, Graham. I've heard so much about you." Once they were out of earshot, Lily let out a low whistle. "Wow, she's something." "She's exactly who my mother would choose," Graham said grimly. "Perfectly poised, perfectly connected, perfectly willing to play her part in this farce." Noelle touched his arm gently. "Graham, about our rooms, you're not moving," he said firmly. "The West Wing has plenty of suitable suites for Eleanor." "But your mother doesn't make the decisions in this house," Graham finished. "I do, or at least I should." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Noelle had come to recognize as a sign of his frustration. "I'm sorry about this, Noelle. I should have anticipated my mother would try something like this." "It's fine," Noelle assured him, though she felt far from fine. "We can move, it's not a problem." "No," Graham insisted. "You both settled in, made those rooms your own. I won't have you displaced because my mother is playing games." He checked his watch. "I need to handle some calls before dinner. Would you—" He hesitated. "Would you join me in the garden afterwards? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." The earnestness in his eyes made Noelle's heart skip. "Of course." As Graham walked away, Lily nudged Noelle with her elbow. "So that's the competition, huh?" "She's not competition," Noelle said automatically. "She's his future wife." Lily hummed skeptically. "Tell that to your face when she walked in." "What does that mean?" "It means you looked like someone had punched you in the stomach," Lily said bluntly. "And he looked like someone was leading him to the gallows." "Lily, I'm just saying," her sister interrupted, "that whatever's going on between you two, it's not one-sided. And Miss Perfect up there knows it. Did you see the way she looked at you? Like you were something stuck to her $500 shoe." Before Noelle could respond, Mrs. Hudson approached, her expression grim. "Ms. Carter, a word, please. Alone." Lily squeezed Noelle's arm and slipped away. Mrs. Hudson waited until they were in the relative privacy of the nearby study before speaking. "Ms. Carter, I feel it's my duty to warn you," she began. "Mrs. Ashcroft is displeased with your position in this household." "So I gathered," Noelle replied dryly. Mrs. Hudson's face remained serious. "You don't understand. Victoria Ashcroft has been the de facto head of this family since her husband died. Graham may own the estate and the company, but Victoria wields considerable influence with the board of directors and the family lawyers. If she chooses to make trouble for you..." What? Are you saying, Mrs. Hudson? The older woman sighed. I'm saying that Victoria has plans for her son, plans that don't include a housekeeper with whom he seems unusually friendly. She will do whatever it takes to protect the Ashcroft name and fortune. I'm not a threat to either of those things. Noelle protested. Perhaps not intentionally, Mrs. Hudson agreed. But if Graham were to become attached to you rather than focusing on his arrangement with Eleanor Harrison, that's not happening, Noelle said firmly, though her heart raced at the suggestion. We're just friends. Mrs. Hudson raised an eyebrow. Are you? Because in the 20 years I've served this family, I've never seen Graham Ashcroft look at anyone the way he looks at you, not even his wife. Before Noelle could process that statement, Mrs. Hudson continued. Be careful, Miss Carter. Not just for your sake, but for your sister's as well. Victoria Ashcroft is not someone you want as an enemy. The warning hung in the air between them, and Noelle felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. Thank you. For your concern, Mrs. Hudson. It's not just concern, the older woman said softly. I've grown rather fond of you and Lily these past few days. I would hate to see either of you hurt in the crossfire of Ashcroft family politics. With that, she nodded and left Noelle alone with her thoughts. Dinner that evening was a tense affair. Eleanor, now dressed in an elegant black dress that Noelle suspected cost more than her entire wardrobe, dominated the conversation with stories of her travels, her friends in New York's social circles, and her family's various properties around the world. Graham responded politely but minimally, while Victoria beamed with approval at every word from Eleanor's perfectly painted lips. Noelle, who had been invited to join them at Graham's insistence, felt increasingly out of place in her simple dress and minimal makeup. So, Noelle, Eleanor said suddenly, turning her cool gaze across the table. Graham tells me you're new to the estate. How did you come to work here? The question seemed innocent enough, but something in Eleanor's tone made Noelle wary. I applied for the position when I saw it advertised. I have several years of experience in household management. How fortunate for you, Eleanor replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And your sister, does she work here as well? Lily is a student, Graham interjected before Noelle could answer. Art history at the State University. She's quite talented. Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly. How nice, and she lives here too. That's rather unusual, isn't it? The Ashcroft estate has always provided housing for key staff and their families, Graham said smoothly. It's a tradition that dates back to my grandfather's time. Victoria made a small noise that might have been disagreement, but she said nothing. Well, I think it's charming, Eleanor declared, though her tone suggested otherwise. Like having a little family right here in the house. The meal continued with similar undercurrents of tension, Eleanor subtly probing for information about Noelle's background while Graham deflected as much as he could. By the time dessert was served, Noelle felt emotionally exhausted. If you'll excuse me, she said, rising from her seat. I have some work to complete before tomorrow. Of course, Victoria said quickly. You must be very busy with all your duties. Graham stood as well. I'll walk you out. In the hallway, away from Victoria and Eleanor's watchful eyes, Graham touched Noelle's arm gently. I'm sorry about that. Eleanor was out of line. She's just curious, Noelle said, though they both knew it was more than that. It is unusual having the housekeeper and her sister dining with the family. You're more than the housekeeper, Noelle, Graham said quietly. To me, at least. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Noelle felt her breath catch. Graham, meet me in the garden in an hour, he said, his voice low. Please, what I need to tell you, it can't wait much longer. When he returned, to the dining room, Noelle stood frozen in the hallway, her heart pounding. Mrs. Hudson's warning echoed in her mind, but it couldn't drown out the hope that had taken root in her chest. An hour later, wrapped in a light cardigan against the evening chill, Noelle made her way to the garden. The sun had set, but the paths were lit by soft landscape lighting that cast a gentle glow over the flowers and shrubs. Graham was waiting by the small pond, staring into the water. When he heard her approach, he turned, his face lighting up in a way that made Noelle's heart skip. You came, he said, as if he had doubted she would. Of course, she replied, stopping a few feet away from him. What did you want to discuss? Graham took a deep breath, then reached for her hands. After a moment's hesitation, Noel allowed him to take them. "Noel, I need to be honest with you," he began. "When you first arrived at my door, I thought you were Eleanor, the bride my family had chosen for me. And when I realized you weren't, I was relieved." "I remember," she said softly. "What I didn't tell you was why," Graham continued. "It wasn't just because I didn't want to go through with another arranged marriage. It was because the moment I saw you standing there with your honesty and your determination and your complete lack of pretense, I felt something I haven't felt in years, maybe ever." Noel's breath caught. "Graham, Please, let me finish," he said, squeezing her hands gently. "I know this is fast. I know it doesn't make sense. You came here for a job, not whatever this is becoming. But these past few days with you in the house, seeing you every day, talking with you, I've felt more alive than I have since before." "Eliza died." He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "I don't want to marry Eleanor Harrison. I don't want another relationship based on family connections and business advantages. I want something real, something true." "What are you saying?" Noel whispered, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you," Graham replied, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "And I hope, that you might feel something for me too." Before Noel could respond, a voice cut through the night. "Well, isn't this touching?" They turned to see Victoria standing at the edge of the garden, her expression cold with fury. Behind her stood Eleanor, her face a mask of shocked indignation. "Mother," Graham said, not releasing Noel's hands, "this is a private conversation. It stopped being private when you decided to humiliate our guest, your future wife, by carrying on with the help." Victoria spat. Eleanor stepped forward, her grey eyes icy. "I was willing to overlook your eccentricities, Graham, your withdrawal from society, your reluctance to fulfill your family obligations. But this," she gestured at Noel with disgust, "this is beyond the pale." Noel tried to pull her hands away, but Graham held firm. "I'm not marrying you, Eleanor," he said calmly. "I never agreed to this arrangement. It was my mother's idea, not mine." "You don't have a choice," Victoria snapped. "The terms of your grandfather's will are clear. If you aren't married by your 45th birthday, control of Ashcroft Enterprises passes to the board of directors, a board that I control." Graham's jaw tightened. "So be it." Victoria laughed, a harsh sound in the peaceful garden. "You would give up everything, your inheritance, your company, your legacy, for this nobody." "She's not a nobody," Graham said, his voice rising. "She's kind and genuine and honest, everything that's been missing from my life since I took over the company." Eleanor stepped closer, her eyes now fixed on Noel. "Do you really think he'll choose you over everything he's worked for? Over the fortune that pays for this estate, these gardens, the clothes on your back?" Noel finally succeeded in pulling her hands from Graham's grasp. "I never asked him to choose, but that's exactly what's happening," Victoria said coldly. "And when he loses everything, do you think he'll still look at you the same way? Or will he resent you for being the reason he lost his birthright?" The words struck Noel like a physical blow. She took a step back, uncertainty flooding through her. "Noel, don't listen to them," Graham urged, reaching for her again. But Noel shook her head, confusion and fear warring with the joy his confession had brought her just moments ago. "I need to think. I just need some time." Without waiting for his response, she turned and hurried back toward the house, tears blurring her vision. Behind her, she could hear Victoria's voice, cold and triumphant. "You see, Graham? She doesn't have the strength for this world. For your world." In her room, Noel paced back and forth, her mind racing. Graham had confessed feelings for her, feelings she had been trying to deny in herself. But Victoria's words had planted seeds of doubt. Would Graham resent her if he lost his company because of her? Was she being selfish, allowing this to continue? A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. When she opened it, Lily stood there, concern written across her face. "I just saw Graham storming through the house looking like he wanted to punch something," she said. And then I passed Mrs. Ashcroft and that Eleanor woman in the hallway, both looking like cats that got the cream. What happened? Noelle pulled her sister into the room and closed the door. In hushed tones, she recounted the scene in the garden. "Oh, Nell," Lily breathed when she had finished. "He said he's falling in love with you?" Noelle nodded miserably. "But his mother's right. If he doesn't marry someone suitable, someone like Eleanor, he'll lose everything." "So what?" Lily countered. "He's still rich, right? Just maybe not mega rich." "It's not about the money," Noelle sighed. "It's his family. Legacy. The company his grandfather built that his father ran before him. How could I let him give that up for me? A woman he's known for barely a week?" Lily took her sister's hands, much as Graham had done earlier. "Nell, when was the last time someone looked at you the way he does? When was the last time anyone put you first?" "That's not fair," Noelle protested weakly. "Life isn't fair," Lily replied. "But sometimes, just sometimes, it gives us a chance at something amazing." "Are you really going to let Graham's mother and his arranged bride take that away from you? From both of you?" Before Noelle could answer, another knock sounded at the door. This time, when she opened it, Graham stood in the hallway, his expression determined. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. Lily squeezed Noelle's shoulder. "I'll give you two some privacy." As she slipped past Graham, she gave him an encouraging smile. "For what it's worth, I'm Team Graham." When they were alone, Graham closed the door and turned to face Noelle. "I'm sorry about what happened in the garden. My mother had no right to speak to you that way." "She was just being honest," Noelle said quietly. "Everything she said was true. If you don't marry Eleanor, you lose your company." "I don't care," Graham insisted. "The company, the money, none of it matters if I have to spend the rest of my life in another loveless marriage. But it's your family legacy." "My legacy," Graham interrupted, stepping closer, "should be built on my own terms. Not my grandfather's, not my mother's. Mine." He reached for her hands again. "And I want to build it with someone who sees me for who I really am. Someone who brings light back into my life. Someone like you, Noelle." Tears welled in her eyes. "This is crazy. We barely know each other." "I know enough," Graham said softly. "I know that when you look at me, you see past all the trappings of wealth and status. I know that when you smile, I feel like I can breathe again after years of suffocating. I know that the thought of you leaving tears me apart inside." He brought one hand up to cup her cheek. "Tell me you don't feel anything for me, and I'll walk away right now. I'll go through with the arrangement with Eleanor. I'll do whatever my mother wants. Just tell me the truth." Noelle closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't say that because it would be a lie. I do feel something for you, Graham. Something I've never felt before. Something that terrifies me because it doesn't make any sense." His smile was radiant. "It doesn't have to make sense. Not yet." Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Graham lowered his head and brushed his lips against hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, but it sent a jolt of electricity through Noelle's entire body. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Graham rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me, Noelle. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Outside, in the hallway, unseen by either of them, Victoria Ashcroft watched through the barely open door, her face hardening with resolve. This little romance had gone far enough. It was time to take matters into her own hands, and she knew exactly where to start. The next morning, Noelle woke with a mixture of joy and anxiety swirling in her chest. Graham's confession and that kiss had turned her world upside down. She'd fallen asleep thinking of his words, his touch, the promise in his eyes. But in the cold light of day, doubt began to creep in. Victoria's threats echoed in her mind. Would Graham really give up everything for her? And more importantly, could she let him? She dressed quickly and headed downstairs, hoping to find Graham before breakfast. The house was oddly quiet, with none of the usual morning bustle of staff preparing for the day. In the kitchen, she found Mrs. Hudson sitting alone at the small table, a cup of tea untouched before her. The older woman looked up when Noelle entered, her expression grave. "Mrs. Hudson, where is everyone?" "Gone," Mrs. Hudson replied simply. "Mrs. Ashcroft gave the staff the day off, most unusual." Noelle frowned. "All of them?" Why? I couldn't say, Mrs. Hudson said, though something in her tone suggested she had her suspicions. Miss Harrison left early this morning, quite abruptly. She left? Noelle couldn't hide her surprise. But she just arrived yesterday. Indeed. Mrs. Hudson took a sip of her tea, watching Noelle over the rim of the cup. There seems to have been some sort of disagreement with Mr. Ashcroft. Before Noelle could ask more, the kitchen door swung open, and Lily burst in, her face flushed with excitement. Nell, have you heard? Eleanor's gone, and Victoria is on the warpath. Oh. She stopped short when she saw Mrs. Hudson. Good morning, Mrs. Hudson. Good morning, Lily, the housekeeper replied mildly. Perhaps you'd like to tell your sister what else you've heard while roaming the halls this morning. Lily's eyes widened. How did you... Never mind. Nell, there's a board meeting happening right now. Emergency session. I heard Victoria on the phone when I passed her study. A board meeting? Here? Noelle asked, confused. In the main office downtown, Lily explained. Graham left about an hour ago. He looked worried. Mrs. Hudson nodded. Mrs. Ashcroft has been on the telephone since dawn. Something about a clause in the company bylaws. A cold feeling settled in Noelle's stomach. The marriage requirement, from Graham's grandfather's will. Precisely, Mrs. Hudson agreed. It seems Mrs. Ashcroft is making her move earlier than expected. What move? Lily asked, looking between them. She's trying to have Graham removed as CEO, Noelle realized, because he refused to go through with the arrangement with Eleanor. Mrs. Hudson set down her cup with a decisive clink. Miss Carter, I believe there's something you should see. She rose from the table. If you'll follow me. Curious, Noelle and Lily followed the housekeeper through the house to Victoria's private study. Mrs. Hudson produced a key from her pocket. Mrs. Ashcroft believes I don't know about her spare key, she explained, unlocking the door. But I've been with this family for 2 decades. Very little happens in this house without my knowledge. The study was immaculate, with leather-bound books lining the walls and a massive mahogany desk dominating the space. Mrs. Hudson went directly to a filing cabinet in the corner, unlocking it with another key from her ring. What are we looking for? Noelle asked, feeling uncomfortable about invading Victoria's private space. The truth, Mrs. Hudson replied simply, pulling out a thick folder. About Eliza Ashcroft's death, about the company bylaws, and about why Victoria is so determined to control her son's life. She placed the folder on the desk and opened it. Inside were newspaper clippings, legal documents, and photographs. Mrs. Hudson, I don't understand. Why are you showing us this? The older woman's face softened slightly. Because in all my years of service to this family, I've never seen Graham as happy as he's been since you arrived, and I believe you deserve to know exactly what you're up against if you choose to stay with him. Noelle picked up one of the documents, a copy of Graham's grandfather's will. She scanned it quickly, her eyes widening. This says the marriage clause only applies if the CEO remains unmarried after their 45th birthday. Graham is only 41. Precisely, Mrs. Hudson nodded. Victoria has been using that clause as a threat for years, but the truth is, Graham still has time. Then why is she pushing so hard for him to marry Eleanor now? Lily asked, looking over Noelle's shoulder at the document. Mrs. Hudson pulled out another paper, a more recent legal document. Because of this, when Eliza died, the board granted Victoria temporary power of attorney over certain aspects of Graham's affairs. He was not himself after the accident, but that power expires on his next birthday, which is in 3 months. So she's losing control, Noelle murmured, piecing it together, and she's desperate to maintain it by getting him married to someone she can influence. Someone like Eleanor Harrison, Lily added, whose father sits on the board of directors. Mrs. Hudson confirmed. The Harrisons and Victoria have been allies for years. If Graham married Eleanor, Victoria would effectively maintain her control over both the family and the company. Noelle sank into Victoria's chair, overwhelmed by the revelation. Does Graham know all this? I suspect he knows some of it, Mrs. Hudson replied, but not the extent of his mother's machinations. Victoria has been very careful. Lily picked up a newspaper clipping about Eliza's death. What about this? Graham said it was an accident. Mrs. Hudson's face grew grim. It was. But what Graham doesn't know is that Victoria had hired a private investigator to follow Eliza in the weeks before her death. She knew about the affair with Alexander long before Graham discovered it. Why wouldn't she tell Graham? Noelle asked. Because Victoria approved of Eliza, Mrs. Hudson explained. She was from the right family, had the right connections. Victoria was willing to overlook the affair as long as appearances were maintained. That's horrible, Lily exclaimed. That's Victoria Ashcroft, Mrs. Hudson replied simply. She believes the family name and fortune are all that matter. Personal happiness is secondary. Noelle stood up suddenly. I need to find Graham. He needs to know all this before the board meeting. It may already be too late, Mrs. Hudson warned. The meeting started half an hour ago. Then I'll go to the office, Noelle decided. Where is it? Downtown, the Ashcroft Tower, Mrs. Hudson replied. But Miss Carter, you should consider carefully. If you intervene, Victoria will see it as a declaration of war. She won't stop until she's destroyed you. Noelle squared her shoulders. I'll take that chance. For Graham. Mrs. Hudson's expression softened into something almost like approval. The car keys are in the kitchen drawer. Take the black sedan, it's less conspicuous than Graham's Ferrari. As Noelle hurried toward the door, Mrs. Hudson called after her. Miss Carter, when this is over, regardless of the outcome, I believe I'll be retiring. This house could use a new housekeeper, someone with both compassion and backbone. Noelle smiled at the unexpected vote of confidence. Thank you, Mrs. Hudson, for everything. The drive to downtown took nearly 40 minutes, every second feeling like an eternity to Noelle. She had never been to the Ashcroft corporate headquarters, but the tower was impossible to miss. 60 floors of gleaming glass and steel dominating the skyline. The security guard in the lobby eyed her suspiciously when she approached the desk. I need to see Graham Ashcroft, she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. It's urgent. Do you have an appointment? The guard asked skeptically, taking in her simple clothes. No, but then I'm afraid I can't help you, he said dismissively. Mr. Ashcroft is in a board meeting and cannot be disturbed. Please, Noelle pleaded. It's about his mother, Victoria Ashcroft. He needs to know, is there a problem here? A smooth male voice interrupted. Noelle turned to see a man in his early 40s approaching, wearing an expensive suit and a curious expression. Something about his features seemed familiar. This young lady is trying to see Mr. Ashcroft without an appointment, the guard explained. The man studied Noelle with interest. And you are? Noelle Carter, she replied. I work at the Ashcroft estate. It's extremely important that I speak with Graham immediately. Noelle Carter, the man repeated, a smile spreading across his face. So you're the one who's got Victoria? Tied in knots. Fascinating. He extended his hand. Alexander Ashcroft, Graham's black sheep brother. Noelle's eyes widened. Alexander? But Graham said you were in Europe. I was, he confirmed. Until Victoria called me last night, practically demanding I return for this emergency board meeting. Something about saving the family legacy from my brother's disastrous infatuation. He studied her with open curiosity. I assume that's you. Noelle felt herself blush. It's complicated, Alexander laughed. With Graham it always is. He turned to the security guard. She's with me, Charles. Family business. The guard hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Alexander led Noelle to a private elevator, using a keycard to access it. So, Noelle Carter, what exactly is so urgent that you've come rushing to my brother's rescue? Quickly, Noelle explained what she had learned from Mrs. Hudson. The truth about Victoria's temporary power of attorney, the actual terms of the grandfather's will, and Victoria's knowledge of Eliza's affair. Alexander's expression darkened as she spoke. That sounds exactly like Mother. Always manipulating, always controlling. He sighed. I left because I couldn't stand it anymore. Graham stayed and fought. I've always admired that about him, even when we were at odds. The elevator stopped on the top floor, opening directly into a reception area outside a large conference room. Through the glass walls, Noelle could see a group of men and women seated around a long table. Victoria stood at one end, speaking forcefully while Graham sat at the other, his face tense. "Perfect timing," Alexander murmured. "Mother appears to be in full character assassination mode." He pushed open the door without knocking. "Sorry I'm late. Transatlantic flights are so unreliable these days." All heads turned toward them. Victoria's face went pale, then flushed with anger when she saw Noelle. "Alexander, you brought her mother." Alexander smiled pleasantly. "Yes, I met Miss Carter in the lobby. She shared some fascinating information with me. Information I think the board should hear." Graham stood, his eyes fixed on Noelle with a mixture of surprise and relief. "Noelle, what are you doing here?" Before she could answer, Victoria cut in sharply. "This is a private board meeting. Ms. Carter has no place here." "Actually," Alexander said, his smile never wavering, "as a shareholder, I move that we hear what Ms. Carter has to say. It pertains directly to the matter at hand." An older man at the table nodded. "Seconded. Let's hear it." Victoria looked around the table, clearly searching for allies, but found none. With obvious reluctance, she resumed her seat. Graham moved to Noelle's side. "You don't have to do this," he said softly. "Yes, I do," she replied, squeezing his hand briefly before turning to face the board. Taking a deep breath, Noelle recounted everything she had learned from the documents in Victoria's study, the true terms of the grandfather's will, Victoria's temporary power of attorney that was about to expire, and her alliance with the Harrisons to maintain control. As she spoke, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Several board members exchanged concerned glances. Victoria's face grew increasingly stony. "That's absurd," Victoria finally snapped when Noelle finished. "These are private family matters being distorted by a housekeeper with delusions of grandeur." "Are they delusions, Mother?" Graham asked quietly. "Because I've had my lawyers looking into the terms of grandfather's will for weeks now. They came to the same conclusion. I have until I'm 45 to fulfill the marriage clause." "Not 41. Victoria's eyes narrowed. "You've been investigating behind my back?" "Just as you've been manipulating my life behind mine," Graham countered. "For years, apparently." He turned to the board members. "My mother called this emergency, meeting under false pretenses. There is no imminent crisis regarding the marriage clause in my grandfather's will. What there is, however, is a power struggle, one that ends today." An older woman at the far end of the table cleared her throat. "Mr. Ashcroft, regardless of the timing, there is still the matter of your association with Ms. Carter. The board has concerns about how it might affect the company's image." Graham's jaw tightened. "My private life is exactly that, private. My association with Noelle has no bearing on my ability to run this company." "But the Ashcroft name," Victoria began. "Is mine as much as it is yours, Mother," Graham interrupted. "And I intend to honor it by running the company with integrity and vision, not by sacrificing my happiness for the sake of appearances." Alexander stepped forward. "If I may, as someone who has observed both the company and the family from a distance for some years now, I believe Graham has done an admirable job as CEO. Our stock prices have doubled under his leadership, our hotels are thriving, and our reputation has never been stronger. Who he chooses to share his life with is, frankly, irrelevant to the business." Victoria looked around the table desperately. "Eleanor Harrison's father sits on this board. The alliance between our families would strengthen the company's position considerably. Are you all willing to throw that away?" An older man, presumably Mr. Harrison, cleared his throat. "Victoria, my daughter called me this morning. She has withdrawn from the arrangement. Apparently, she found the atmosphere at the Ashcroft estate inhospitable." Victoria's face drained of color. "Charles, surely my daughter's happiness matters more to me than business alliances," Mr. Harrison said firmly. "Perhaps that's a lesson you might consider, Victoria." A heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, Graham spoke, his voice steady. "I move that we end this meeting and return to actual company business, unless there are any other false crises to address." One by one, the board members nodded their agreement. Victoria remained rigidly in her seat as they filed out, until only she, Graham, Alexander, and Noelle remained. "Is this what you want, Graham?" Victoria asked, her voice oddly small. "To throw away generations of careful alliances for this?" She gestured dismissively at Noelle. Graham moved to stand beside Noelle, taking her hand firmly in his. "What I want, Mother, is to live my own life, to make my own choices. And yes, if you're asking if I choose Noelle, the answer is unequivocally yes." Victoria stood, gathering her dignity around her like a cloak. "Then I have nothing more to say to you." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Except that your father would be deeply disappointed." After she left, Alexander let out a low whistle. "Well, that was dramatic, even for Mother." He clapped Graham on the shoulder. "For what it's worth, little brother, I think Father would be proud. He never had the courage to stand up to her the way you just did." Graham looked surprised. "You think so?" "I know so," Alexander replied. "Why do you think he spent so much time at the office?" He smiled at Noelle. "It's nice to finally meet you, by the way. Anyone who can cause that much disruption in the Ashcroft family dynamic is someone worth knowing." "Thank you for your help," Noelle said sincerely. "I wasn't sure how I was going to get past security." Alexander winked. "The black sheep has his uses sometimes." He checked his watch. "And now, if you'll excuse me, I have a flight back to Paris in 3 hours. Much as I've enjoyed this family reunion, I prefer to keep an ocean between myself and Mother whenever possible." After Alexander left, Graham turned to Noelle, taking both her hands in his. "You were incredible," he said softly. "But how did you know about all this? The will, my mother's power of attorney?" "Mrs. Hudson," Noelle explained. "She showed me the documents your mother kept in her study." Graham laughed. "Mrs. Hudson, I should have known. She sees everything that happens in that house. She also mentioned that she's thinking of retiring," Noelle added with a small smile. "She suggested I might make a good replacement." "Did she now?" Graham's eyes twinkled. "And what do you think about that?" Noelle hesitated. "I think it might be awkward, being the housekeeper when we're—" She trailed off, suddenly uncertain. "When we're what?" Graham prompted gently. "I don't know," Noelle admitted. "You said you were falling in love with me, but Graham, it's been less than 2 weeks. This is all happening so fast." Graham led her to a nearby seating area, still holding her hands. "You're right, it is fast. Too fast, probably, by most people's standards." His eyes held hers, serious and sincere. "But I've spent the last 3 years of my life feeling numb, going through the motions. Then you walked through my door and it was like someone turned the lights back on." "I feel it too," Noelle confessed. "But I'm scared. Your world is so different from mine. Your mother hates me. And what happens when the novelty wears off? When you realize I don't fit into your life?" "Noelle," Graham said softly, reaching up to cup her cheek. "You don't have to fit into my life. We can build a new one together. One that isn't about the Ashcroft name or fortune or what's expected of us." He smiled. "And as for my mother, she'll either come around or she won't. Either way, I choose you." Tears welled in Noelle's eyes. "I want to believe that's possible." "It is," Graham insisted. "But only if you choose me too." For a long moment, Noelle searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt or hesitation. She found none. Instead, she saw only certainty, hope, and something that looked remarkably like love. "I choose you," she whispered finally. "I don't know what happens next, but I choose you, Graham Ashcroft." His smile was radiant as he leaned in to kiss her, a kiss full of promise and possibility. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Graham rested his forehead against hers. "What happens next," he said, "is entirely up to us." 3 months later, the gardens of the Ashcroft estate were in full autumn glory, the trees a riot of red and gold, the late roses still blooming against the stone walls. In the small gazebo by the lake, Noelle stood nervously adjusting her simple cream-colored dress while Lily fussed with her hair. "Stop fidgeting," Lily scolded gently. "You look beautiful." "I still can't believe we're doing this," Noelle murmured, glancing toward the house where guests were beginning to gather on the lawn. "It's too soon. It's been 3 months," Lily reminded her. "Besides, it's not a wedding, it's just a birthday party that happens to include a certain announcement." Noelle smiled at her sister's characterization. "Graham's 42nd birthday." had seemed like the perfect opportunity to announce their engagement to friends and family. A small, intimate gathering rather than a formal event. The sound of footsteps on the gazebo stairs made them both turn. Graham stood there, handsome in a dark suit, his eyes lighting up at the sight of Noelle. "I know it's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding," he said with a grin, "but since we're not getting married today, I thought I'd risk it." Lily rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "I'll give you two a minute, but don't be too long, the guests are arriving." As she left, Graham took Noelle's hands in his. "Having second thoughts?" "No," she said honestly, "just marveling at how much has changed in such a short time." Indeed, the past 3 months had been a whirlwind. Mrs. Hudson had retired as planned, though she still visited regularly for tea with Noelle and Lily. Alexander had surprised everyone by returning from Paris and taking a position with the company working alongside Graham to expand the hotel chain internationally. "And Victoria, your mother is here," Noelle said quietly. "I saw her car arrive earlier." Graham's eyebrows rose. "She actually came. I sent the invitation, but I didn't really expect her to accept." "People can surprise you," Noelle replied with a small smile. After the board meeting showdown, Victoria had retreated to her apartment in the city, maintaining a frosty distance. But 2 weeks ago, she had unexpectedly appeared at the estate, asking to speak with Noelle alone. The conversation had been difficult, stilted, but ultimately productive. Victoria would never be warm or maternal, but she had grudgingly acknowledged that Graham seemed happier than she had seen him in years. It wasn't approval exactly, but it was a start. "She told me she wouldn't miss her son's birthday," Noelle added. "No matter how foolish she thinks his choices are," Graham laughed. "That sounds like mother. Small steps, I suppose." "Small steps," Noelle agreed. From the lawn, they could hear the murmur of conversation as more guests arrived. Soon they would join them. Soon Graham would stand before friends and family and announce their engagement. Soon they would begin planning a future together that neither of them had imagined possible just a few months ago. But for now, in this quiet moment, it was just the two of them, a man and a woman who had found each other when they least expected it. Graham leaned down to kiss her softly. "Ready?" Noelle smiled up at him, her heart full. "Ready." Hand in hand, they walked toward the house, toward their guests, toward the future they had chosen together. The bride he hadn't ordered. The life neither of them had planned. The love that had surprised them both. Sometimes, Noelle thought as Graham squeezed her hand, the best things in life are the ones you never saw coming. The end.